Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 11th of May 2024. Sorry I'm a little bit late, it's Saturday and my boy doesn't have football, had a lion, parents came round, surprise visit, there's 2 hours, I'll never get back. Anyway, welcome to the news from the General Staff, the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, and you can find those caveats in the description to the video below. And we have a lot of big numbers on this sheet today. 1,320 personnel lost is almost the record. That is a phenomenally high number of people. Two things. One, remember these are human beings. Always need to remember this, that they aren't just numbers. There are people dying or being maimed on the battlefield. And two, that we kind of get used to numbers in the 1,300 area. Now, I know we can talk about whether these are accurate or not, whether they are 20% too high, 30% too high. You take 20% off that and you are still above 1,000. So these are really big numbers. 15 tanks is a very high number of tanks to lose in one day. 40 APVs, that's MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles and armoured personnel carriers. 40 lost in a single day. 55 artillery systems in a single day. These are well above average in all of these categories. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, interestingly that's still above average, 64 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 9 pieces of special equipment. Yesterday, according to the General Staff, and take that with a pinch of salt, yesterday was a very bad day for the Russians. I'm wondering whether there has been a lot of targets taken out in the Belgorod region. So I think with the Russians attacking there, again, like I said yesterday, I'm just not sure this is going to be worth their while. The attrition rates are going to be high for the Russians because supposedly the Ukrainians were prepared, as you'd expect them to be for such an attack. And there would have been, I'm fairly sure, some precise hits on Russian vehicles and troops in that area. And indeed, we are seeing the video evidence of that already. Now, before we go on to that, Andrew Perpetua hasn't released a loss statistics sheet today, but he has done a little bit of, well, he did a live stream last night where Konstantin and himself and Gick and others were talking about, at this particular point, losses for the Russians. Andrew had already talked about how BTRs and BMPs were at the MTLBs, so armored personnel vehicles, the old Russian workhorse, the old Russian tractor. He's saying that as far as we can work out, there are literally no stocks of these left in Russian stockpiles. But anyway, here's just a little snippet of that conversation. This is Konstantin first and then Andrew.
Falling off after the Desert Cross was hit. So I think it's a problem, and they don't have it's hard to scale. Like on this level of losses, it's really impossible to scale the manufacturing. There's simply none. Even Russia, even Soviet Union did not produce them at such huge quantities as Russians are losing right now.
So he's saying that the losses are way beyond the Russia's ability to make these things, and even at the top of the Soviet production schedules, these losses are too high. And he's saying the bit just before that was talking about people falling off. He said that the armor on the MTLBs is okay. You don't get hit by shrapnel. It's just in being inside these, like BMPs. He had a big session of talking about how horrible BMPs are, but they're using golf carts and motorbikes, and they're just falling off them, getting killed. This is because they don't have the equipment.
Yeah. So and to be clear, I'm not saying Russia ran out of MTLBs. It's just that their storage has run out, or is very close to running out. We don't know for sure. But if their rate of withdrawing them from their storage remained consistent, then they're probably out of them right now.
So that's a reference to the latest satellite imagery of the storage comes from 2023. The rate they were losing them from 2022 to 2023 was really bad, and looking at all the claims of General Staff, it's got worse. And so therefore, if that trajectory is maintained, they should have no more MTLBs. That doesn't mean they've completely run out of them. They've still got them actively being used, but they've got no stockpiles. So once they're used up in their active usage, once those have been attrited away, you're just going to see them use golf carts and motorbikes and cars, and which is what we are starting to see.
And BTR 80s are probably going to run out if they haven't already. And BMP 2s are probably going to run out very soon.
And interestingly, we've already seen 0 BMP 3s in stock, so they have run out. They're the newest one. BMP 2s and BMP 1s are looking, like those stockpiles have been seriously eaten into.
And it's interesting.
BMP2 is the core of their mechanized forces. They don't have anything else but BMP2, because BMP1s are like, it's literally junk.
Well, they have a whole bunch of BMP 1s.
I think like it's the most produced mechanized vehicle on Earth. I think they produce, like, total production was, I think, 35,000 of them or something.
Well, I think they have like 1,000 or 2,000 left in storage.
Yeah. So here's the idea. So, and this is where they're going to talk about how terrible the BMP 1s are, but we won't go into that. So BMP 2s are looking like their storage is precarious. BMP 1s, although they have got those left, there's a couple of thousand left. The question is, what is their status? So the ones that would be left will be the ones in the worst condition. So you extract the ones in the best condition, and then you progressively have to restore, put more effort into restoring those in worse and worse condition. So the 2,000 you've got left of the however many thousand you started the war with in deep storage will be your very worst, or the ones that have been cannibalized. And so even on the BMP 1s, it's not looking good. Just the statistics do not favor, the evidence and statistics do not favor Russia being in a sustainably good position at the moment. And they are then committing themselves to another front in the Kharkiv Oblast. And we are seeing the US giving at the moment another 100 Bradleys, another 100 M113s. You've got indigenous production in Ukraine ramping up, where you've got Bogdanas being produced at pretty decent levels. You've got, and they were talking about this in that Konstantin knows some people involved in that process, and he's like, they're in a good place for making Bogdanas at the moment. Just you get a sense of, the longer this war goes on, you might think the longer this war goes on, the more it is beneficial for Russia as they grind down public support for Ukraine. But actually, I think Ukraine, again, it comes down to the economics. If Ukraine have consistent support from the West, and they can ramp up their own indigenous production, Russia are in an unsustainable position at the moment with regard to their losses that they are 100% taking. Like, I can now show you lots. Oops, I didn't want to show you that. So, sorry. So, we are seeing in the Kharkiv direction lots of losses for the Russians in the attacks that they've done in the last 24 hours, 36 hours. It is not looking good. Yes, they might have taken control over villages, but those villages are in the area before you get to the fortifications. So these are not defensible positions that the Ukrainians have got trenches in. So for the first 5-10 kilometers over the border, there will be no Ukrainian defenses, and there probably will be minefields, but not as extensive as till you get further back, because the Ukrainians would have been within mortar, artillery, and drone range in building those fortifications. So they build them behind 10 kilometers back from the front line. So where the Russians are possibly taking villages along the border, you might think, oh, that's a real problem. It's not really a problem. It's exactly what the Ukrainians would have been planning for in sort of working out how they are going to defend the border against a Russian attack. We're going to come onto that a bit later. So what do we have here? We have a Russian shed on wheels here, or shed on tracks. So this is a turtle tank, again, in the Vovchansk direction, Kharkiv region. Damaged by mines. So mines have already taken out a vehicle here that then gets blown up by drones. And this is what the Ukrainians would be completely expecting and planning for, which is the Russians running over mines, disabling their own vehicle or getting their vehicles disabled, and then drones picking them off. And we're already seeing that. And so when you're looking at the loss statistics from the General Staff, and why are they so high today? Why have they lost 40 armored personnel vehicles and 15 tanks? Well, actually, you can add another front where the Russians are finding it very attritional to what was already attritional along the entirety of the front lines previously. We've got here a golf cart, by the looks of it, full of Russians getting taken out by a drone. And then, so you're going to be adding on personnel and vehicle to those lost statistics there. Meanwhile, the Russians have blown up a dam in the Kharkiv region to worsen the logistics of the Ukrainian armed forces. And that's over there on one of the sets of lakes to the east of Kharkiv, and that has been taken out. I don't know how serious that is in terms of what the ramifications will be of that dam going down. So a brief synopsis of what's going on here. I have to pause these things just because in case horrible things turn up. Briefly about the situation in the Kharkiv region from the fighters of the Hostry Katuzy unit working in the operational zone. The Russians occupied several villages that were located almost on the border and were strategically difficult for their maintenance. As mentioned, our line of defence was not breached. Now the battles are much less active than they were yesterday. The situation is completely stabilised. So if I have a correct handle on this, then the Ukrainians are not worried about what's going on up in Kharkiv. Is not the big. First of all, it's not a massive invasion. It's just small incursions of limited numbers of equipment and people, possibly trying to cause the panic that it may well have caused to some extent. But actually, the Ukrainians who are in the know, those who are fighting, are like, yep, this is not a problem. We've got this contained. Interesting here, just another example of drone accuracy. This is not this is not pertinent to anything I've just been saying with regard to Kharkiv, but this is quite an incredible bit of footage. So you have a guy standing out, and again, this is the sort of thing that can happen with both sides, of course. This isn't particular to Ukraine, but here we have a Russian standing outside with the manpads. They've clocked him. Drones have caught him. He's waiting for a Ukrainian aircraft to pass by. This is what you have to do. And then they're like, right, okay, there's a manpads unit in this building. And you have the two guys in the back here. You've got the manpads that's caught here. And then this drone can go through. Okay, it's a large opening. And it has these inside. It has these, like, those fly, what they call butcher's strips or whatever. So you've got those kind of beads that come down to keep the flies out. They've kind of tried to do that across here to keep drones out. But of course, if you don't put them all across, if you're leaving them open there, then the drone can get in. It's like, there's a mistake. There you go. That drone can now get in. And it does indeed get in. You've got the manpad up there. You've got the guy there. And anyway, I won't continue to show it. But that drone gets in and explodes that entire room up, and actually, there's a smoke from it, basically destroys that entire room. The accuracy of these drones in being able to get into places like that, you get your reconnaissance, you get your pinpoint accuracy, and that's taken out a manpads team or a manpads operator, which then protects the Ukrainian skies, protects the Ukrainian pilots. So yeah, drones are a problem, obviously, but there's another example of how accurate they can be. Right. Claimed loss of Ukrainian Buk M1 Telar, so that's a transporter erector launcher and radar, to a pair of Russian Lancets, allegedly in Kharkiv Oblast. This Telar has been converted to employ non-standard missiles. So this is one that the Russians have been like whooping about because it's a Frankensam, so presumably a RIM-7 Sea Sparrow. This is likely the first published example of a Frankensam Buk Sparrow Telar. So the RIM-7 Sea Sparrow is an anti-aircraft missile that's shot from boats, from ships, and that's been adapted to be able to fire out of a Buk launcher. And this is one of the initial first kind of Frankensam iterations. that has been destroyed in the Kharkiv region by a couple of Lancets. Lancets are still a real challenge. And I've already talked about that. So the successes of what I did want. Right, I'm going to have to find it. That should be something else. Bear with me 2 ticks. So that should have been this loss, and don't know what it's as a result of. Was it just an accident? Was it partisan activity? Russian media report that a fuel tank was on fire last night in Orlov district, Rostov region in Russia. So Rostov is just to the west of the Donetsk region in Ukraine. Across the border, several carriages of the freight train were derailed and a fire broke out. The train traffic has been stopped. So that is, I don't know whether it could be a drone strike on that or something. Anyway, that's incredibly important for the Ukrainians. I don't know whether it's on that same railway line that's now been extended to Mariupol and then Berdyansk and the south of Ukraine as a way of getting around the Kerch Bridge issues. But that the oil freight has been hampered there, I think is really good news for the Ukrainians. Right, 2 explosions were heard in Kharkiv city last night. So the Russians still hammering away at Kharkiv, as you would expect, especially since they are also attacking north of there on the ground. The blasts were confirmed initially by Ukraine's authorities, but no update since. Not a big issue in chats this morning, so it seems little damage occurred. So that's good news. So in fact, it's very quiet on the missile drone attacks into Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainians last night, quite early on, did a strike on a Russian oil depot in Ravenki in the Luhansk region, and I indeed reported this on my Frontline update. So that's how early it was done, and it was done by an ATACMS cluster munition, which I think is an interesting choice there. So here we have Ravenki. So you got Luhansk city there, Horlivka, Makivka, Ilovaisk, and then coming towards the Russian border, that's where we are at. Before you get up, you got Bakhmut there. So yeah, that is where the oil depot was. That's it on the satellite imagery. Judging by another video from Ravenki, it looks like ATACMS and cluster munitions were used. So there were a number of explosions there that would reflect the cluster munition being used. Additional photos. I mean, it seems like a pretty major fire. And then someone taking a picture of a cluster munition, sub-munition from Ravenki. So it indeed does seem like that is what happened. Anyway, major fire there. That seems to be a successful attack again on the Russian oil infrastructure. This is going to cause a bit of an issue. They were talking about this on Andrew Perpetua's live stream. So there are many ways that this plays out for the Russians. One, so supply and demand. Supply is hit, so demand stays the same, and so the price goes up. So this will cause the prices to go up. You have less of this. There's just less stuff around. So the Russians are going to be less able to get hold of this stuff, which then means you have redundancy. So you have certain vehicles not being able to move and do stuff because of a lack of fuel and whatnot. You get logistics being affected, so it might take longer to do things, as in to get oil to the front line or to get fuel to the front line. So they're hitting both oil depots and refineries. This then means that stuff is delayed, it takes longer, it's more expensive. And then obviously if they're going to prioritize the army getting the fuel and whatnot, then that will adversely affect the economy back in Russia. And so, there are lots of knock-on effects to doing this. And America will hope, or the US will hope, that this doesn't have a knock-on effect on global supplies and therefore prices. But from the way it looks at the moment, Russia is going to be starting to really hurt, and it will affect their military operations as well as their economic operations, which also affect their ability to make money and fund the war. And also, it might well affect exports as well. So that's money going out and hydrocarbons going out, money coming in. So the battle damage assessment from the fuel depot at Ravenki that was attacked, the Russian military fuel truck was visible previously on satellite imagery, so that may have gone down as well. Well, what to do? But, it was a tough night in Luhansk by the looks of it. Now, we've seen this missile coming down in Belgorod. A rocket or missile made an impact in Rakityansky district in Belgorod, and that gave a big old bang, as you can hear on now. I'm not going to play it, but Belgorod was pretty, I think, active last night. Russian authorities complained of overnight drone attacks in Belgorod, Kursk, and Volgograd regions. So Ukrainians sending drones into Russia, and I presume a lot of that will be strategic targeting of Russian targets that are to do with the Kharkiv offensive that's taking place. So I think Belgorod would have been very active. And then John Ridge looks at like one of those missiles coming down in Belgorod. It might even be that one I just shown you. Inclined to believe this is either a failed surface-to-air missile with solid propellant still combusting. So why was it on fire as it came down? That's a question. Or it's a ballistic missile coming in extremely fast and experiencing substantial aerothermal heating. So it could be it could be one of the Russians' own missiles going wrong, or a Ukrainian missile going wrong, or a ballistic missile going right. Who knows? And then explosions today in Donetsk, the city of Donetsk. It appears that, according to Russian propaganda, the Ukrainians are hitting Donetsk in occupied Donetsk Oblast with HIMARS. So it seems to be fairly active today. And I thought I'd show you this just to give you a sense of, this is Odessa. It wasn't last night as far as I know, but it just gives you a sense. It reminds me rather of the Blitz in World War II in London, and just all sorts of projectiles flying through the air from several directions. You got tracers, you got Gepards enfilading, or you got the drone being hit, then coming down. So it looks like you've got two drones being hit. Yeah, in two different places, and then that falls to the ground. Of course, that then gives you an indication that drones, when they fall to the ground, they still cause problems, especially in urban areas. But these are the SPAGs, these self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, the Gepards, a couple of them being used there really effectively. Germany's delivered 52 of these with at least 15 more Cheetahs. That's an upgraded Dutch version that they've got from the Middle East, from Jordan, I think, being pledged. So they've got more on the way, and these are incredibly useful for the Ukrainians in a number of different places, particularly, as you can see, in Odessa there. Right. Going on to other bits and pieces, Zelensky has confirmed that the Russian military has launched a new offensive in Kharkiv Oblast of Ukraine. He said that Ukrainians knew about Russians' plans, and that the Russians were met by Ukrainian brigades and artillery fire. So alongside of that, over 1,700 civilians have been evacuated from the oblast over the past 24 hours. In fact, Pierre, who I went around in the backseat of Greg and Zhenya's battle bus around the front lines, he was telling me that he knows people up in Kharkiv who are involved in evacuations there. So they are very actively evacuating people. As we've seen, those frontline villages some of them will have been taken by the Russians, and that's nothing particularly to worry about, but there would have still have been people living around there. Ukraine repelled attacks on multiple settlements, evacuated over 1,700 civilians amid heavy Russian shelling that has killed and injured civilians. The Ukraine General Staff reported early today that there have been repelling attacks near Strelecha, Krasna, Morokovets, Olinyakove, Lukyantsy, and Ohitseve, Hatchesheche, and Plentanivka. Sorry. As far as that word is concerned, who knows? It's too many random letters. Russian forces occupied several villages. I know I'm going to get people telling me how to pronounce it. Yes, it will happen. Russian forces occupied several villages difficult to defend. So this is the whole point about that they won't have fortifications there. But the defensive line was not breached, according to Hostry Kozutsi unit of the National Guard. The fighters state that the battles are now significantly less active than yesterday, as mentioned earlier in the video, on the 10th of May when Russian forces started a new offensive in that direction. So there is going to be a lot of focus on this area. They'll be reporting out of there today, no doubt, from a number of different sources. I'll try and keep you updated if I can. Right, General Pavlyuk has said in The Economist that the critical phase of the war will come in the next 2 months. So with American assistance only beginning to reach the front lines, Putin's generals are throwing in all the combat-ready material that they have to test Ukraine's exhausted and undersupplied troops. Exactly what I've been saying over the last week or two. This is the time to hit for the Russians. I just don't know whether going in Kharkiv is a sensible use of their equipment and personnel. Anyway, Russia knows that if we receive enough weapons within a month or two, the situation could turn against them. And we're already starting to get this sense that the Ukrainians are getting some equipment. They are using things like HIMARS more readily. And we're yet to see like widespread use of artillery in the way that we saw it previously. But you know, I think things are turning on the battlefield to some degree. And the Russians, I think, are culminating somewhat. Though they needn't have culminated, they'd had those 50,000 troops up in those 3 northern oblasts that are now poised to attack Kharkiv. They put them on the front lines. They wouldn't be culminating. They could be taking further ground while the Ukrainians are on their knees. So again, this is that. I will see. It could well be worth it for the Russians to attack it up in Kharkiv. I just don't know that it is. The US has said, with John Kirby saying they are confident in Ukraine's ability to defend itself, so they do not expect Russian troops to make progress in the new offensive. Quote, Russia may take further steps in the coming weeks, but we don't expect any major breakthroughs, and over time the influx of US assistance will allow Ukraine to withstand these attacks through 2024. So John Kirby seems to be fairly confident that Ukrainians are all right, particularly with regard to that northern attack. Romanian police have reported that 11,000 Ukrainian men have allegedly crossed the border into Romania since February 2022. So since the beginning of the war, the Ukrainians have lost 11,000 men to Romania that could be fighting on the front line. So there's 11,000 men that have escaped drafting and would be very useful on the front line, that's for sure. So that's illegal crossings of the border into Romania since the beginning of the war. And of course, you can multiply that with all the other borders and other ways that you can get out of Ukraine. Security Service of Ukraine has prevented terrorist attacks planned by the enemy's General Director of Intelligence in Kyiv on the 9th of May. So Victory Day, there were apparently some terrorist actions that were supposed to take place, but they were foiled by the Ukrainians. SSU was proactive, and the perpetrators of the attack were detained red-handed. So, caught in the process of doing it, we have also collected evidence that unequivocally confirms the Russian trace. So the SSU promises to provide all details on the special operation later. So that could be something to listen out for. Interesting. And then finally, this is the second greatest army in the world, right? They appear to be trying to jumpstart an Il-76. Trying to move the plane. So it's going well. Going really well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Speak to you soon.